On this week's episode of Weekend Spin, we're going to be taking a look at Caribou, the album that Elton John's own producer calls the worst thing he's ever worked on. But is it really that bad? The sound on it is the worst. The songs are nowhere. Even the sleeve was wrong. The original artwork was great, but it turned out to be wrong. The lyrics weren't that good. The singing wasn't good. The production is just lousy. It's embarrassing. And then, when I got nominated for the Best Produced Album and the Best Produced Single of the Year, I just couldn't stop laughing. I consider that record to be the worst thing I've ever done. These are the words of producer Gus Dudgeon talking about the Elton John album Caribou, an album that he produced. Side note, Gus Dudgeon produced all of Elton's albums during the time period that is referred to as his classic period, starting with his second self-titled album in 1970, up to his 1976 11th studio album titled Blue Moves. And Gus Dudgeon talks favorably about all of his collaborations with Elton during this time, with the exception of Caribou, of course. The legacy reviews from the time of its release, while maybe not as dismissive, do also seem to mostly agree that this album isn't the best from this particular period. But is it really that bad of an album? After all, it does contain two of his best-known hits. Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me, which reached number 16 in the UK singles chart and number 2 in the US, and The Bitch Is Back, which reached number 15 in the UK and number 4 in the US. It also contains a track that I refer to as the darkest song that Elton and Bernie Taupin ever wrote, and it is, in my mind, an underrated masterpiece. More on that track in a moment. Hello, this is TJR, and welcome to Weekend Spin. If you like these types of videos and want to see me do more, please click like and leave a comment so that YouTube recommends this video to more viewers like you. Caribou was Elton John's 8th studio album, released in June 1974, only 8 months after the now legendary Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. Elton John has, in interviews, described this album as being recorded quickly. And how do you define quickly? Well, according to EltonJohn.com, the album was written, rehearsed, and recorded in 3 weeks. This feels absolutely mind-blowing by today's standards. But apparently, necessity forced this, as he and the band were under enormous pressure to finish an album and immediately embark on a Japanese tour. And Gus Dudgeon cites this fact, saying that the album was done at the wrong time as the band had just finished a tour prior to coming into the studio to record. Apparently at the time, Elton also had a 2-album-a-year contract to fulfill at this time, something that also feels absolutely mind-blowing by today's standards as well. Now, we'll swing back to this topic also at the conclusion of this video. But for now, let's explore this album track by track. Starting with track 1, The Bitch Is Back.
I was justified when I was 5, raising Cain, I spit in your eye.
This is the album's first banger. Apparently, the song was inspired by a quip made after Elton entered a room in a rather pissed-off mood. Bernie Taupin heard the quip and thought it would make a nice hook for a song. Now, for my money, the real secret weapon on this song is Davy Johnstone's incredibly precise, aggressive, and yet still very funky guitar riffing. I also love the horns on this one as well, and the sax solo from Tower of Power's Lenny Pickett is out of this world. Finally, Elton gives one of his most aggressive vocal performances. Now, the word bitch was, back then at the time of its release, and now, still used in reference to the female of the species. As a heterosexual teenager growing up in the 70s, I can state from experience that this was an extremely openly homophobic time period. America was frightened by homosexuality during this time, and none were more frightened than heterosexual men. Now remember, Elton had not yet come out at this point in his career, so to hear a male rock star refer to himself as a bitch could have been interpreted as a not-so-subtle way of doing just that, which in turn could have led to quite a bit of backlash against him, something that really did happen when he really did come out a few years later. And yet, Elton sings the song with so much confidence, so much swagger and bravado, that not a single heterosexual even batted an eyelash, or at least none that I was aware of. I was justified when I was 5. Raising Cain, I spit in your eye. That's spaghetti western Clint Eastwood manliness, if I've ever heard it. Track 2, Pinky.
Pink is as perfect as the 4th of July.
There is a sublime beauty to the song that is hard to describe. It's deceptive because at first listen, it can feel like what we used to call easy listening music. But after a few listens, that sublime beauty that I was talking really starts to seep in, and you realize that this is more than just an easy listening tune. The opening piano riff on this one sounds very familiar to the one used on the album's closing track, entitled Ticking. Go ahead and give it an A to B comparison and let me know if you hear it too. Now, while nowhere near the level of the track that preceded it, Pinky is a song that just keeps growing on me. It's a serene, pastoral, mid-tempo ballad that feels like the musical equivalent of waking up on a beautiful day, a day where no alarm clocks are needed. This is probably the album's most underrated track. Track 3, Grimsby. Permit me a bit of folly here, and let me state that this upbeat, fun little rocker feels like it would have sat better on Rock of the Westies, an album that would be released a year later. Grimsby was never released as a single, but I have always found it to be so fun to listen to that I feel it could have had been a single if it had been given the chance. I really feel this one has a lot of hit potential. For me, this track sits right up there with the album's 2 hit singles. It's that catchy. Track 4, Dixie Lily.
Dixie Lily, jogging like a grand old lady.
Yeah, this one is a bit on the corn side, but it's by no means a bad song by any stretch. For this one, Elton draws on traditional country and New Orleans Dixie, and Gus Dudgeon's production complements it very well. I view it as one of the album's weaker tracks, but it's no clunker, and it's certainly many steps above being album filler. Track 5, Solar Prestige Agamon. Hopefully I've pronounced that right. This is the song where Elton sings absolute gibberish for just under 3 minutes. This song was written as a joke in response to listeners reading too much into Bernie Taupin's lyrics. So in this sense, I guess you could call this Elton and Bernie's I Am the Walrus. The only problem with that comparison is Solar Prestige Agamon lacks the musical inventiveness and psychedelic surrealness of I Am the Walrus. The song borrows from Tin Pan Alley, a genre that Elton has mined in the past and sometimes to great effect. And while this might be his best use of the genre, its saving grace is its tongue-in-cheek attitude and Elton's humorous parody of Italian opera singers. Gus Dudgeon's relentless creative approach does its best to keep the track sounding interesting since there is no lyrical narrative to hang your hat on. But at the end of the day, Solar Prestige Agamon is a joke that wears thin pretty quick. This is the album's weakest track. Track 6, You're So Static. This song feels very much in line with Elton's earlier, more soul and R&B influenced tracks from Honky Chateau. It's not quite up there with the album's two big hit singles, but this is a solid, fun, and funky rocker, and Nigel Olsson's drums are relentless on this one. Track 7, I've Seen the Saucers. A good song. Maybe not a hit single, but a good song. I would describe this as a power ballad with no love interest. Gus Dudgeon's production elevates things with some very nice Beatlesque touches, and Davy Johnstone's guitar textures also add to this effect. Track 8, Stinker.
Say what you will, but I'm a stinker.
A cool, fun, funky pop blues track. There is absolutely nothing wrong with this one. Just like with You're So Static, this one also feels like it fits in with his more soul and R&B influenced songs. Not a hit single, but a solid, enjoyable rocker nonetheless. The horns kill, and Johnstone's guitar is right on the money for this one. I would place this one right alongside Grimsby and You're So Static. Track 9, Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me. The album's other banger. This track is a masterclass in going for the slow build to the chorus. For the first minute, it's just Elton's vocal and piano. Yes, Nigel Olsson does keep a pulse going on the hi-hat, but this is something you feel more than you hear. Then Davy Johnstone enters with an amazing harmonic riff that just sets the song on fire. The chorus hits, and Nigel Olsson brings it home on the drums full force, and it's all so damn satisfying. This song deserves all the praise it gets. Track 10, Tickin'.
Remember Mama said, tickin', tickin', pay your pound and sweat.
This is the album's underappreciated masterpiece, and one of Elton's and Bernie's most underappreciated songs. I guess it's the subject matter that has kept it from ever getting the appreciation it deserves. It is one of their darkest compositions, whose subject matter has, sadly, only become more relevant versus less so since it was first released. I could and should do a huge in-depth essay on this one song, but for now, I will say that Tickin' is a song that tries to get inside the mind of a person who has mentally snapped. The majority of this track is just Elton at the piano, with almost no other musical accompaniment, the only exception being a synthesizer detail added by David Henschel. The recording has a very eerie and dark level of intimacy. I sometimes call it the pop song equivalent of Taxi Driver, and an exploration into mental darkness. I want to take a moment and just point out the fact that Bernie Taupin's lyrics for this song feature a number of racial slurs. Now, if these types of slurs trigger you, then I recommend that you don't listen to it. But I want to stress that it's painfully obvious that Bernie Taupin is not using these slurs because he believes or agrees with them, or is in any way racist. He is using them because, as a writer, it is his job to get into the head of the character that he is writing about. He is trying to get into the head of a person who has lived a lifetime of repressive fear that finally one day explodes into a murderous rage. On this track, Elton's vocal was recorded live with the piano, a very rare occurrence on Elton's songs, according to the eltonjohn.com website. And the song does include some of what I would refer to as his most impassioned piano playing ever. Back in 1974, mass shootings were not as mind-numbingly common in the United States as they are now, in 2025. Sadly, it can become all too easy to grow numb to it. And after a while, it just becomes a coping mechanism. Songs like Ticking, however, have the ability to shake you out of that numbness. Ticking is an unsung masterpiece, and it probably always will be. And I think it's a stronger, more emotionally powerful track than either of its two outstanding hit singles. But it's never going to chart. The way I look at it, Caribou is a mostly solid album, but it's brought down by 3 songs. From bottom to top, those 3 tracks are Solo Prestige Gammon, I've Seen the Saucers, and Dixie Lily. As I record this, I realize that I'm probably not going to get too much pushback regarding Solar Prestige Gammon and I've Seen the Saucers, but I do know that Dixie Lily does have its fans. And so for those of you who really do like this song a lot, I like it too. I don't think it's a terrible song. It's just not as good in my mind as the rest of the album. Again, feel free to argue with me in the comments. With that out of the way, I think that the rest of the album is perfectly enjoyable. I think the main criticism I have for Caribou is that it needed a little more time to find its focus. You know, all the other albums from this classic period have their occasional clunker here and there. Yet, they all seem to have a thematic focus, and I don't hear that when I listen to Caribou. It's also clear from Gus Dudgeon's accounting that the band was just a bit too tired and a bit too rushed for this one. And I do have to agree with him on the cover art. This is certainly not Elton's best. In a different time period and under different circumstances, Elton, Bernie, and the band would have been able to take a bit of a breather after releasing such a huge creative opus like Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. Following up an album like Goodbye Yellow Brick Road was always going to be a monumental task, so it's a shame that MCA Records couldn't have said, hey, you know, you guys gave us 2 albums on the last one. You've earned a little bit of a breather. Take a little more time on the next one if you need. Given the time and pressure placed on them, I have to wonder if in hindsight, anyone from the Elton John camp thought, hey, you know, maybe we should have spread Yellow Brick Road out over 2 albums instead of releasing it as a double album. That definitely would have given them a little more breathing room, but then we wouldn't have had the magnum opus that was Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. 1974's next album would be Elton's first greatest hits compilation. So I guess that gave them a bit of a breather before they got to work on Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy, which in my mind would end up being his greatest album ever. At least that's my opinion. And hey, Elton even agrees with me on that one, if that means anything to you. By the way, I did do a deep track-by-track dive on this album. You can check it out right here on YouTube. I'll leave a link. Currently, I own 3 versions of this album. I do have this 70s UK pressing, and some years back, I did pick up this remastered CD edition that has 4 bonus tracks. More recently, however, I managed to get a hold of the Anniversary Record Store Day release from a few years ago. This is a double LP set that features an entire LP of bonus tracks. Looking back with the benefit of hindsight and the rest of his catalog, I think I could say that while Caribou is probably the weakest of the classic 70s period albums, it is by no means a bad album. In fact, it's pretty good. It's just not quite up to the standard of all those other albums during his classic period. But again, that in no way makes this a bad record at all. I'm sure there are plenty of artists out there back during the 70s that wish they could have made an album this bad. This is TJR. I want to thank you so much for watching. I also want to thank my patron supporters for all the support that they give. If you'd like to be a patron supporter, please go to patreon.com/TJR the original. Patron supporters do receive exclusive content not available on this channel. In a few moments, you're going to see some recommendations for some other videos that I have created that I think you might enjoy. Please check them out. I also invite you to click subscribe so you never miss a video. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.
She's a world-class situation. She plays a chick trick on my mind, and it bears examination. All the things she masterminds. Well, she'll say it once, she'll say it twice, that she'll love me to the end. She'll say no one makes the sunshine, baby, and I never comprehend.